Hey, Southern Nevada, let's talk about your tap water. Despite its hard, mineral-rich taste, your water surpasses drinking standards, so don't confuse hard water with its quality. Sourced from the Rocky Mountains, your water is analyzed more than 328,000 times a year and treated and monitored 24/7 by a team of technical experts. Learn more about the testing of your water at snwa.com. SNWA is a not-for-profit water agency. Hey y'all, executive producer Layla Mohammed here. Vegas residents know hard work, but you don't have to do it all yourself. TaskRabbit has been helping locals in the Neon City for over a decade with everything from furniture assembly to minor home repairs. Don't let that to-do list run your weekend. Use the TaskRabbit app to describe what you need and find a skilled tasker in your neighborhood who can take it off your plate. You'll see the hourly rate up front, so there's no surprises at checkout. Download the TaskRabbit app or visit taskrabbit.com today to get those home to-dos crossed off.
In the wake of New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's stunning win, far-left progressive candidates across the country are galvanizing behind his message of affordability and equity. So today on CityCast Las Vegas, we talk with Matthew Mondschein. He's from the Nevada Current, and we talk about the Democratic Socialists of America candidates running in Southern Nevada, and if Las Vegas could have a Mamdani moment of its own. It's Tuesday, April 7th. I'm Sonja Cho Swanson, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Okay, so Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Matt, let's dig into a couple specifics. So what races are DSA candidates running in? Who's challenging who? Give us the rundown.
So we have Val Thomason, who's running for Assembly District 10. She's running against Venice Karras, who is the incumbent, who holds the seat now. Mm-hmm. Val ran against Venice Karras in 2024 in a three-way primary.
Gotcha.
And placed second.
Huh. And so Karras is the maybe more establishment Democratic candidate. Is that kind of the thinking behind her position?
Yeah. Karras has the endorsement from the Democratic Assembly Caucus, which has a lot of power in the state legislature. Sure. So Val's kind of running to her left. A big part for these DSA candidates throughout the country is not taking any corporate money. So Val is running a campaign that's completely, funded by small donations, while according to documents that were filed with the state, Karras has received some funding from Southwest Gas and MPC Summerlin. So there's some corporate money there, but also Karras has received some funding from and support from unions as well.
Interesting. Okay, so with these two candidates in the primary, which will essentially become the only race for this seat, Assembly District 10, can you tell us a little bit more about what makes these two candidates different? So where does Val Thomason actually sit to the left of Venice Karras?
Yeah, so Val is very big on capping rent increases. We saw that the same thing play out in the New York mayoral race with Mamdani.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about the other candidates. So there's two DSA candidates running in Southern Nevada. The first one you mentioned, Val Thomason in Assembly District 10. Who's the second candidate?
Yeah, so in Assembly District 34, we have Sean Navarro. This district runs from Summerlin eastward to North Jones Boulevard. Okay. And Sean Navarro is running against Assembly member Hanadi Nadim. Same thing here. Hanadi Nadim has the support from the Democratic Assembly Caucus. Also received campaign donations from Southwest Gas and MPC Summerlin. So Sean's also running similar program as Val, who's capping rent increases, getting money out of politics, increasing the state minimum wage, and advocating for a Medicare for All program that progressives and DSA candidates have been calling for, since Bernie into 2016.
Right. This is straight out of the Mamdani playbook, right? This is a big call towards affordability on everyday factors, healthcare, rent, all those things.
Yeah, they both made it clear to me that, I asked them what the biggest issues are. And, you look at voters in Nevada and across the country, right? The number one topic is affordability. It's only getting worse in terms of rent, in terms of healthcare, groceries. So, we see comparing that to Zohran Mamdani's campaign, that was like the number one issue, right? Um, it, Reaching out to voters who probably have been disillusioned with the political process, maybe stepped away from it, haven't been voting, and kind of re-engaging them and getting them back in the conversation and addressing their needs, especially after, the Democratic Party right now has a identity crisis of how to connect with voters again after losing to Donald Trump in the last election.
Yeah. Well, you actually, because you wrote a piece on these DSA candidates for the Nevada Current, excellent piece. Listeners should go and check that out. But as part of your reporting, you followed these candidates on the ground. You went to a rally. You followed them as they went door knocking, door to door. What was that experience like, and what kind of reception did they get? Do you have any stories from your time shadowing their campaign?
Yeah. So one of the big things that Val brought up to me was after she lost to Venice Karas in 2024, the LVDSA, Las Vegas DSA, kind of looked back on her campaign and, saw flaws. And then through National DSA, the national organization, got tips and pointers from everything they learned from Zohran. She told me the lack of social media presence and needing more canvassing and people on the ground knocking doors. Both of those things were crucial in Zohran Mamdani's campaign. Just basically going back to grassroots campaigning, right?
Gotcha.
They know they're outgunned in terms of campaign funding, but what they can do is mobilize people to go knock on doors and attract the social media presence to kind of counteract that lack of campaign financing.
The Las Vegas Academy of the Arts, or LVA, is a 12-time Grammy Award-winning high school, the most of any high school in the nation. And the LVA Music Conservatory faculty are performing in a special fundraising concert on Monday, April 20th at 6 p.m. in the Loudon Theater. Mark your calendars. The goal is to raise $50,000 for a 9-foot Steinway Model D concert grand piano. Their existing concert piano is beyond repair, and this opportunity is due to a partnership with Southern Nevada Music. There are multiple ways to support. You can attend the concert, you can donate, there's even a silent auction, and you don't have to actually go to the concert to donate or participate in the silent auction. There's some very cool things you can bid on, including a live vocal caroling event. You can get the mariachi band to come perform for you, get a jazz song dedication, what a great gift, and my personal favorite, you could actually, on stage, guest conduct one of their orchestra performances. So visit www.lasvegasacademy.net to purchase tickets, donate, access the silent auction, and support LVA students. Every ticket, donation, and bid brings us one step closer to giving these talented students the instruments they deserve. So you were out there as they were doing the door knocking. What were people saying when Sean and Val started talking to them about their platforms?
Yeah, it was actually Sean Navarro's birthday, so the LVDSA threw a birthday party at a park here in Las Vegas, as well as sending canvassers out, both before and after the party. And what I saw, with the canvassers were, obviously you're not going to have everyone answer a door, but once they actually got to, speak to voters, there again, that issue of affordability is coming up, and canvassers just listened to their needs and redirected it to, both Val and Sean's, the campaign platform of, capping rent increases and, increasing the minimum wage, and people were very receptive from what I saw.
What's their story? Because I feel like Val and Sean kind of have also unique life stories too. What's their background?
Yeah. So Val started getting into politics when Bernie Sanders was first running in 2016. She got involved with that campaign as an organizer while she was working as an Uber delivery driver.
Hmm.
So that's from there, that got her more involved in politics. And, I asked her specifically, what has changed from those days where saying Democratic Socialist, that was like a
A
big
bad
no-no in
word.
the media. Yeah, it was a bad
Yeah,
word. It
yeah.
was
Hmm.
people scared people, but now, you have everyday normal Americans who, they go on their Instagram, they see something of Zohran Mamdani, or I'll also add that Bernie Sanders did win the state. So, Nevada voters um, have shown in the past that they're, very receptive to, these promises, these campaigns, and these platforms from leftist candidates.
Yeah, I think particularly when they resonate with like working class values and the needs of working class people. Um, what about
Yeah.
Sean? What's Sean's background or Sean's story?
Sean got into politics. Again, he stressed to me, in his own political journey, he was, just like kind of a mainstream Democrat. He voted mainstream Democrat. He came to Democratic Socialism because of his grandfather
Hmm.
passing away. And, just, being from an immigrant family and seeing how much his own family has struggled kind of led him that way. Um, that was like a big point for Sean as well, in terms of advocating for Medicare for all,
Hmm.
um, and not taking any money because, according to the campaign filings from Hanadi Nadim,
Hmm.
there's some, private cash flowing in from private healthcare. So again, that was like another issue that Sean wanted to emphasize to voters as they're out there knocking doors. He's a normal guy. His grandfather's story of them getting sick and struggling financially, and
Hmm.
speaking to voters about that. A lot of people obviously resonate with that. A lot of
Hmm.
people are struggling. Working class people are struggling in Las Vegas and around the country, and that's why they're pretty receptive overall to hearing these candidates out.
So why do you think that local DSA candidates believe that Mamdani's election actually represents like a sea change? Like it wasn't just like a one-time, one-off thing. Like, why do you think that they can really be replicated here in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so with Mamdani's victory, you saw just a giant coalition of young voters that were energized. His advocacy for Palestine, and
Hmm.
again, we'll touch on this later with some other candidates in Nevada, but APAC funding is like a big thing, that there's a divide with
Hmm.
mainstream Democratic establishment candidates and the
Yeah.
more progressive DSA candidates. Um, but even then, you had a majority in New York City of Jewish voters vote for Zoran. So again, I think it's just voters across the country are, they're tired and they're looking for some change.
I want to go back to this split that you're talking about within the Democratic Party because, for listeners who might not be aware, like DSA is not its own separate party. It is a faction within the Democratic Party. So this split between sort of the mainstream Dems and DSA politicians in Nevada isn't new. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the recent history of that tension?
Yeah, so when Bernie Sanders won the primary, there was a kind of the progressives took over the Nevada Democratic Party. But then a lot of them were kicked out and left, and then kind of the establishment control, the control of the party went back to the establishment.
I think there's kind of apocryphal tale in 2016 of Bernie Sanders sort of DSA supporters. Remember the chair throwing incident during the 2016 Nevada Democratic Convention?
Exactly.
Debatable over whether that actually occurred, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of, it was fomenting for quite a while.
Yes, it was very heated, and things kind of died down a bit after that. But I think both of these candidates and, Las Vegas DSA are trying to, get back to holding some semblance of power. Obviously, these are assembly legislature seats, right? We're not talking congressional or Senate races like we see in some other states. But, it's a start. They see it as a start to kind of, let's reintroduce this progressive force back into Nevada Democratic politics.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that the time is more ripe now than ever. Maybe this is the DSA's moment. Is this their chance to kind of like maybe even overtake the Democratic Party in Nevada?
I would say it's a first step, right? You got two candidates right now, and if you can get two in, then they can start selectively targeting other seats. They specifically targeted these seats because Val has history in AD 10, and it wasn't that close of a. It was close enough that they thought it was doable, especially in a two-person race.
Okay.
And then as well as Navarro as well in AD 34, seeing this as a winnable seat. That's why there's the LVDSA only.
So they kind of chose what they
endorsed.
saw as sort of maybe vulnerable establishment Dems in those
exactly.
In those two seats. Gotcha.
Yep.
I think there's a sense from candidates to the left flank of the Democratic Party that, okay, well, Bernie won in 2020, so there's untapped opportunity here in Nevada. But that Bernie victory was in a very crowded primary field where a few candidates had dropped out. So what's the DSA pitch that their candidates can survive in a general election?
Yeah, I would say their pitch would be Zohran did it, right? We see a lot of money that came... But if I can
just push back for a second, because Zohran actually won in New York City with ranked choice voting, which we don't have in place here in Nevada, right? So, I mean, that kind of gives a slight edge, one could argue, to smaller party candidates, right?
No, absolutely. That was a huge advantage that Zohran had in New York City, and voters in Nevada voted against doing ranked choice ballots the last election.
I think it's just too confusing, frankly.
Yeah, it can be, but like you said, that is a huge in. That kept Zohran alive when he was, polling low, only at 2%, and then that kept his campaign alive. That allows, the smaller candidates to stay alive. So it is different, right? We have different realities from New York City than Nevada. But their pitch would be, again, that's where the voters are. They're looking for someone to address the affordability crisis, and the mainstream Democrats aren't doing it. And if Biden or Kamala Harris were representative of that, they lost the last election to Donald Trump. So they're just tapping in. They're tapping into the anger that voters feel right now.
They're saying that the secret sauce that Biden and Harris were missing last election was what the DSA candidates have. They got the secret sauce.
Exactly.
I'm speaking in very strategic political terms here, lots of jargon. Forgive me.
Yep.
But I guess to wrap then, my question is, what do you think the attention that these candidates are receiving now says about how the primaries are shaping up and what issues will be front and center come November?
Yeah, so both Val and Sean are part of an election season where we see in Nevada some big kind of progressive challengers to the establishment Democrats. The LVDSA is playing a part in that, but we see with Alexis Hill running against A.G. Ford for the governor's race, the Democratic primary. Alexis Hill is getting funds that is able to match Ford in terms of campaign spending.
Not
but
quite as much, though. He's got quite a more significant war chest than she does.
For sure. He has much more of a war chest, but comparatively to some other candidates, it fills that gap to where she can stay competitive. But we also seen Ford get massive endorsements from the Democratic establishment, from our senators, from our congresspersons. And then we also see Susie Lee being challenged by Dr. James Lally, who's a cardiologist. He entered the race citing Lee's vote in support of the Laken Riley Act and her campaign receiving funds from AIPAC. So again, we kind of see that that frustration of voters across the country that are showing for campaign financing in general, but specifically from AIPAC, part of the Israeli lobby in the United States. We see that playing out with Grant Plattner in Maine, who's running for the Senate seat there against Susan Collins. We've seen it play out in some congressional races in Illinois. So again, he's challenging Susie Lee from the left. So Val, Sean, we have some interesting races in our state coming up that involve some progressive challengers.
Yeah, that seemed like they're really part of a deep blue wave, the likes we haven't really seen in quite a while.
Yeah, the Trump administration, with the war in Iran currently happening, gas is now $5. I filled my car up last night, so paid $5 a gallon.
It hurts a little bit.
Again, it hurt me. Yeah. So, but that's just, again, it plays into the affordability. So whatever candidates can, talk to voters on that level and address those needs, we'll see if they're successful, and if the rolling the dice that LVDSA is doing, if that comes to fruition and pays off.
Well, Matt, we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for breaking this down for us. Thanks for coming on CityCast Las Vegas.
Thank you, and thank you to CityCast. It was a pleasure to be on and talk to you today.
And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. Don't forget, you can support this show and get some great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Take care.